Again, I'm Miss Gadlin Encartado, and I am your OLC here in Oral Communication in Context. Today is all about the process and elements of communication. And of course, at the end of this lesson, you will be able to define and discuss the elements of communication. You will be able to understand the rules of these elements in the process of communication, and you will be able to identify forms of communication. And lastly, we'll be able to utilize different forms of communication to improve quality of life. So I have here, just like what you can see in the screen, I have here the illustration of the process of communication. And when we say process, from the word itself, process, it means it has steps in order for us to successfully communicate. So, of course, it involves the sender, the message to be sent, encoding, channel, of course, the receiver, decoding, the message received, noise, and lastly, the feedback. So, according to this, the communication process pertains to the steps through which communication takes place between the sender and the receiver in an understandable manner. So, in order for us to understand the process of communication, let us first have the sender, okay? So according to this, sender or source, the sender or source is an individual, group, or organization who initiates the communication. All communication begins with the sender. The sender is the source of information for a target receiver or audience. So when we say sender or source, from the word itself, sender, this is the source of information, or this is where the information comes. So again, when we say sender, this is someone who sends the message to the receiver. It can be you can be a sender, right? Or the person who is talking to you. So this is the sender. The first one who initiates the communication is the sender, or the source of information is the sender. Okay? Now let's have the encoding. The first step the sender does involves the encoding process. This process translates the ideas or concepts into the coded message that will be communicated. So here in encoding, you are constructing the message that you will send through your mind, or you are composing the message that you will deliver through your mind. So when we say encoding, this is the process when you are turning your thoughts into communication. So that is the meaning of encoding. You are constructing the message through your mind. Okay, understood everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Opo, ma'am.
Okay, next let's have the channel. According to this, to start sending the message, the sender uses a channel, which is also known as a medium. It is the method used to deliver the message. Most channels are either oral or written, but as technology evolves, visual channels are becoming more common. Usual channels include the television, radio, telephone, mobile phone, and etc. So, when you say channel, it is the means of communication, or how you will deliver the message. Are you going to deliver it through broadcasting, through speaking, through writing? So these are the mediums through which we can send a message. We can also use the television, we can also use radio, telephone, mobile phone, and many more. So again, the channel is the means of communication, or how you will deliver the message, okay? Next, let's have the decoding. Decoding is executed by the receiver. Once the message is received and reviewed, it is sent to the brain to be interpreted to appoint meaning to it. Successful communication occurs when the receiver correctly interprets the sender message. So here in decoding, this is the time when the receiver will listen or read the message. This is also the time when the receiver will interpret the message that comes from the sender, from the word itself, decoding. Okay? So the receiver is receiving the message or interpreting the message that comes from the sender. This is what we call the decoding. Next, let's have the receiver itself. The receiver is the individual or individuals to whom the message is directed. All interpretations by the receiver are influenced by their experiences, attitudes, knowledge, skills, perceptions, and of course, culture. So when we say receiver, the receiver is the person who gets the messages and try to understand what the sender is actually want to say, or what is the sender actually wants to convey. So that is the receiver. Of course, it will be based on the receiver on how he or she will interpret the message, or it will be based on the experience of the receiver on how he or she will interpret the message. Okay, again, the receiver is the person who gets the message and tries to understand what the sender wants to say or wants to convey. Okay? Now let's have here the feedback. Feedback is a key element of the communication process since it allows the sender to review the effectiveness of the message. It may be in the form of a spoken comment, a long sigh, a written message, a smile, or some other action. Without feedback, the sender cannot confirm that the receiver has interpreted the message correctly. So feedback refers to a response. So that is the clue word, a response from the receiver. So of course, feedback is very essential in communication process because this is the part when we will able to know if whether the receiver has understood the message from the sender, or whether the receiver agrees or not to the message that comes from the sender. So that is the feedback. This is the response from the receiver. And lastly, of course, we have the noise. Noise is also another common barrier. Noise can occur during any stage of the process. Noise is essentially anything that distorts a message by interfering with communication process. So again, noise is the barrier to effective communication, or noise refers to anything that interferes with the communication process. So, example is if you are talking to someone and there is a background noise, of course, it will affect the communication. So, noise can take many forms, including a radio playing in the background, another person trying to enter your conversation, and any other distractions that prevent the receiver from paying attention. So that is the noise. This is the common barrier in the process of communication. Understood, everyone? Hello?
Opo,
Opo,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Now let's have the, after process of communication, now let's have the forms of communication. Under forms of communication, we have the intrapersonal communication. Talking to yourself is normal and necessary. You are simply engaging in intrapersonal communication. So herein, the intrapersonal communication, from the word itself, intra, it means inside or within. So intrapersonal communication is defined as communicating with oneself, meaning to say you are talking to yourself. Just like what you can see here in the picture, you can be the source and you are also the receiver. So that is the intrapersonal communication. Example is when we are talking to ourselves and we are saying to ourselves that am I able to do this, or kaya ko ba to? So that is an example of intrapersonal communication. Another example is when you are talking or when you are cheering yourself, you can do this, self, I know you can do this. So that is an example of intrapersonal communication. So who can give me example of the things you often say or you usually say to yourself when you are communicating with your own self? What are the things you usually say to yourself? So again, examples are you can do this, and Another example is, am I able to do this? So that is an example of interpersonal communication. And then your other self will respond, of course, I can do this. Okay, according to Rafael, pag bibili ng gamit or damit po, ma'am, 'pag di alam kung ano yung bibilhin ko ba 'to or ito, 'wag ko na bilhin 'to. Okey, sabi niya, bibilhin ko ba 'to or ito or 'wag ko na bilhin yun, gano'n, according to Rafael. So according to Jonah Faith, everything will be okay. Of course, that is also an example. Did I just fail? According to Aaron. Hey, very good. What should I do? Yes, that is also an example of interpersonal communication. Very good, Nicole. You're pretty. Yes, that is also an example of interpersonal communication. It's okay, self. Better luck next time. Yes, of course. Very good, Sunshine. That is correct. That is an example of intrapersonal communication. Should I try it or should I not? Very good, Nera. That is also an example of intrapersonal communication. I believe in myself that I can all get through all the problems. Okay, that is correct, Lauren. So all of your answers are correct. Um, those are the examples of intrapersonal communication. Now, after interpersonal communication, other forms of communication, we also have here the dyadic communication. Dyadic communication is when two people communicate. Communication may take place through the phone, SMS messaging, or face-to-face, such as interviews, dialogues, or ordinary conversations. So here in dyadic communication, when we say dyadic communication, it refers to an interaction between two persons, just like what you can see here in the picture. So the person one can be the source and he can also be the receiver. And the person two can also be the source and he can also be the receiver. So that is the meaning of dyadic communication. It refers to an interaction between two person. Okay, that is only two persons. So after the interpersonal communication, which is only one person, now we have the dyadic communication, which is the two person is communicating with each other. Okay, so examples are, I'm giving an example, a husband talking to his wife. What else? It can be you and your friend. So we can call it dyadic communication. Another example of dyadic communication is an interviewer versus an interviewee. Of course, the interviewer will ask question to the interviewee, and then the interview will respond and vice versa. So that is dyadic communication. It refers to an interaction between two persons. Now let's have the small group communication. Small group communication happens when more than three people are involved. This is simply an enlarged group, which usually happens to solve problems. So in a small group communication, just like what you can see here in the picture, they are communicating because they have a purpose. So they can all be the source and also they can all be the receiver. So that is the small group communication. They are communicating because they have a purpose. So example of small group communication are business meetings. Are you familiar in that in business meetings? And another is team meetings. So another example is conference. So according to the last section that I taught, he gave me an example. According to him, when they are talking with her friends. So that is also an example of small group communication. Another example is when you are talking with your family. So all of your family are talking, including you, of course. So that is an example of small group communication. Who can give me example of small group communication? From the word itself, small group. Group project meetings. Very good, Aaron. That is correct. How about the others? Group reporting meeting. Very good. Team meetings. Very good. So that is an example of small group communication. Now let's have the public communication. So after the small group communication, now we have the public communication. From the word itself, public, you are meaning to say you are speaking in public, okay? So according to this, public communication happens between one and several other people. This large group type of communication usually happens in public speaking. In public speaking, the speaker addresses the audience to persuade, inform, entertain, or do all of three. So here, just like what you can see in the picture, this is the source, and they are also the source. They can also be the receiver. But of course, this is the main source. So when we say public communication, it is when a person or a group of people gather. So just like what you can see in the picture, they gather here and start sharing information to an audience. So this is what we call public communication. So he or she will speak in public. Examples are seminars. Some examples of public communication happen through public speaking events, conference, seminars, press conference, and so on. Very good, Sunshine. Lawrence, press conference. Mas very good. That is correct. All of your answers are correct. Okay. So okay. So all of your answers that you campaigns. Yes, very good. Wow. So those are the examples of public communication. I'm so impressed, everyone. And lastly, of course, after public communication, since you all know that, we have the mass communication. President election. Very good, John of Faith. That is also correct. Now let's have the mass communication. Mass communication happens when you communicate to an extremely large audience. It is usually mediated by audio and or visual means. The purposes are to entertain, persuade, and or inform. So here in the mass communication, you are sending the information or the message to a large audience, meaning to say the information can go through any parts of this world. It can go through America, China, and many more countries. So examples of mass communication: television, radio, newspapers, recordings, movies, magazines, comics, billboards, computers, and the internet. From the word itself, mass communication. So these are all under the mass communication. Examples of mass communication include commercial advertising, public relation, according to Sunshine, journalism, and political campaigning. Okay. So anyone, if you have questions and clarifications regarding on our topic for today, please chat it on the chat box.